What's up, everyone, and welcome to Play Hard and Love Big Radio, the official podcast of Spotted Dog Yoga and SUP, based out of Folsom, California. Check us out at spotteddogyoga.com. Play Hard and Love Big Radio is dedicated to bringing you the inspirational people and the inspirational stories to help you connect to your center so that you can live a more purposeful and powerful life. And we have a very inspirational person with us today who's got a lot of really great stories that are going to inspire you. I guarantee it. Davide Sartoni, what's up, my friend?
How's it going, buddy?
So good. It's good to see you, man. You look really great.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. It looks like you've been getting some sunshine, huh?
I try. I try to spend as much time outside as I can.
Yeah, totally. And I can see right above your head there on your background, the river is your happy place, isn't it?
Finding the river has changed my life, so it's definitely my happy place these days.
So good. Well, Davide has spent some time on this podcast before, but for those of you that haven't had a chance to listen to that episode or don't know Davide, Davide is the River Sup guy, and he's all about creating stoke for the river and for paddleboarding on the river, even more specifically. And Davide, your commitment to paddleboarding is really even goes deeper than that to the realm of community, wouldn't you say?
It is, yeah, and it's sort of one of the things that I'm most proud of this endeavor is the great community of paddlers that we've developed in our area, and I might venture to say that in all my travels, it's a pretty unique and special group that we have here. So I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to have that I've had to build this and continue to build this.
And you say your area, I know that that could encompass a large area because you do travel and take people on expeditions all over the place. But where is it that you live and where is it that you do your stand-up paddleboard classes mainly?
So I live in Reno, Nevada, and we have a local river that runs through town called the Truckee River. So I do a lot of my personal paddling on the Truckee River when there's water. But my home river, where I do most of my paddling year round and where I offer classes, is the South Fork of the American River that runs right through Coloma, California, about half hour from Placerville and an hour from Sacramento.
There you go. And I've spent some time up there with Davide. Oh my goodness. And we'll have you talk a little bit about your classes, but I would say that was one of the greatest experiences that I've had on the river in my entire life. And I believe first and foremost, just because of who you are and the way you set it up, man, you made me feel incredibly safe, gave me the tools to be successful, and also gave me the tools to fall and be okay with falling. Would you tell us a little bit about how it is that you got into stand-up paddleboarding on the river, and then how it transitioned into competition, and then ultimately how it's transformed into a place where you're building community through stand-up paddleboarding on the river?
Absolutely. So I would start by saying that my wife tricked me into into trying stand-up paddleboarding, and at the time it was on Lake Tahoe. I actually grew up with a pretty big fear of water. I had a bad experience when I was a little kid in swimming lesson, and I sort of turned off my interest in water sports and my liking of water sports. I tried many water sports throughout my young and adult life and didn't really like any of them because of that fear of water. And then when Jeannie, greatest wisdom, tricked me into trying stand-up paddleboarding on Lake Tahoe, I sort of fell in love right away. There was just something magical about standing on a board and floating over this super clear water. And at the time, I was, skiing was one of my professions, both downhill, backcountry, and cross country skiing. And I thought, oh wow, this could be something that I can get into, and maybe there's some fitness element to it, some racy element to it, and I can use it as a way of cross training during the summer months when I can't get on snow in our area. So that's sort of like how that started. Maybe a year and some change into it, we started thinking about the idea of, oh wow, I wonder if we can take our boards and and load some gear on the boards and go somewhere and camp. We were into backpacking at the time and sort of like backpacking with our boards. And initially, we started looking at lakes in the area that maybe have islands and we can paddle to the island and camp on the island. And then we're like, well, if we can do that, maybe we can do like a slow moving river where people go down in open canoes, and maybe we can do that on our subs. And so I did some research and I found this section of river in Utah on the Green River, goes right through Labyrinth Canyon, right outside Moab Canyonland National Park. And it looked like the perfect place to test this out. And so we went out there, we rented some inflatable boards, which we had never used inflatable boards before. We had never really been on moving water on stand-up paddle boards before, and so we embarked on this 4-day self-supported mini expeditions through the Labyrinth Canyon, and it was just magical. There was something special about being now on a board on moving water, and I was like, oh man, definitely want to experience more of this. So we thought about it, and we're like, well, if we can run moving water, I wonder if we can run white water on our boards. And so we gave that a go on some rivers in California that were pretty easy. And we quickly discovered that we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't understand the hydrology of the river. We didn't understand the hazards. We didn't have the right gear. And we were worried that, we could get in over our heads and maybe even become, a statistic. So we decided that we needed to get some instructions. And at the time, this was 2015. The closest place to get a class on whitewater stand-up paddleboarding for us was to travel to Colorado, which is sort of like the epicenter of the sport. And so that's what we did. We went there, took a class, had an amazing time together in the class. And when we came home, we're like, well, now we need friends to be able to get into the sport with us. And so that's sort of like what started the endeavor of getting more people into experiencing the amazing excitement and joy that comes from stand-up paddleboarding on rivers and stand-up paddleboarding in rapids. That's kind of where it was born.
And what would you say that you learned and have learned about paddleboarding on a river that is different than paddleboarding on a lake
Hmm.
or on a flat
Um,
water?
yeah, great question. I mean, the water's moving. And because the water is moving, there's energy in the water. And so understanding that the thing that really, I think, fuels me when it comes to the technical aspect of the sport is I don't have a whitewater background. There's a lot of folks that get into the sport of stand-up paddleboarding on rivers that have experience paddling in whitewater on other crafts. That could be kayaks, that could be rafts or canoes, and so they already understand whitewater. And when I got into the sport, I didn't. And so for me, learning about the hydrology, learning about how the water moves in space has been something that's like really, really cool and exciting. And then once you start understanding how the water moves in space, then the next part is, well, what can I do to channel that energy, to use it to my advantage so that I can get where I want to go, right? So figuring out how to move in space on that water, where to be with your stand-up paddleboard, what angle does the board have to be pointed at, what pressure do you need to put on which rail at what time, has become like a really, really cool puzzle, right? And as my skill level builds and improves, I get into more difficult whitewater. And I find that as I get into more difficult whitewater, the movement of the water in the medium becomes more three-dimensional. So there's like new things to learn and new things to practice. So like the learning process, it's never over. It's a really, really cool component of it. So basically, the one of the biggest difference is understanding how the water moves, understanding how to set yourself up for success so that you can utilize the power of the water, the energy in the water, and also understanding that because the water is moving, there are hazards specifically to that. And so being able to understand where those hazards are and how to mitigate them to an acceptable level so that you can safely run the rapid or the section of river that you want to do is all part of it. And that's why I'm a big proponent. If you're not a river person, you don't understand the hydrology and the hazards, to go out with somebody who can give you some coaching. I always recommend going out with an instructor, but somebody who's experienced and can give you some good coaching would be a really good option, so that you don't make the same mistakes that I made when I initially got into the sport.
Yeah, I remember when I took the day to come up there and work with you, one of the more challenging things to understand for me on my paddleboard was how to lean into the water as it was coming down versus putting weight on the outside foot on the downriver side. I remember quite a few times just getting into the current, having the weight on the wrong foot, and then being pushed off the board like nothing else, you know?
Yeah, I tell this to my students all the time. Once you understand the concepts, you don't need me out there to point those out to you, because the river is going to let you know right away when you're
Yeah.
not doing things correctly, because you're going to be swimming. So it's the river is our greatest teacher when it comes to understanding how to move in water. But it's nice to have somebody who can at least explain the foundational concepts, so that then you can build on them, right? And that's why I encourage going out with a good coach to start out with.
Absolutely. Well, and then as far as safety is concerned, I feel like that it wouldn't be a great idea for somebody who doesn't know much about the river just to jump on a river and go after it. I feel like having a coach and someone who is experienced and understands how to train you to be safe so that you feel comfortable out there is really important. And I know that you do that. So what are some of the safety protocols that you go through in your classes, and what do you think is the most important safety aspect in river sup in compared to flat river sup?
Well, there's lots of different facets of it. We might start talking a little bit about equipment, and there's quite a few things that are a requirement when you're getting on the river. And I might start with discussion on a leash. Oftentimes, we associated it being connected to our board, whether it's on a lake or in the ocean, as being like our life safety, right? Because it's connecting us to our flotation craft. Many people go out without PFDs, or with PFDs that maybe are the inflatable ones that you put around your waist. And we can have a separate argument about how effective of a flotation device that actually is. But many see the leash, the connection to the board, as being a critical component of the safety element when you're going out on water. The thing that happens on a river is, because the water is moving, is that leash now can become entangled in obstacles that are on the river. Now, those could be rocks, those could be snags or trees. If you're in an urban environment, there could be shopping carts in the river and all sorts of other structures that leash could become entangled on. The big issue that there is with the leash that we typically wear in the ocean or on a lake is that leash is typically attached on the lower part of the leg, below the knee, at the calf, or ankle area. And especially if you're not wearing a PFD, like a vest style PFD, if you're in current and the leash is tangled around something, you're going to go underwater for a period of time. And if you cannot release that leash, there's a high probability of drowning. With the leash being on the lower part of the leg, even in surprisingly slow moving current, it's really, really hard to be able to release it. And so, unfortunately, we've had fatalities in our area, and unfortunately, all over the world, from folks wearing ankle leashes and paddling in current. So, that would be probably the first thing I'd want to address with folks, is making sure that if you are wearing a leash on the river, it shouldn't be a leash that's attached to the lower leg. It should be a leash that's attached to the waist or higher, that it's releasable with either hand, and that the individual has practiced with that. So that would be component number one. We've mentioned the PFD already. I see a lot of people that are paddling on lakes where their PFD is not on them. Maybe it's on their board. or maybe it's not what what I would say is maybe like a good options for a flotation device. So on the river, especially, you want to make sure that you're carrying a and you're wearing a vest style PFD that's going to provide you flotation. Many of our rivers in the West are cold water rivers, and so there's the issue with immersion shock when you fall in cold water. And so having a PFD that's snug, or around the body, and can provide immediate flotation is really important. Um, a helmet, it's also something that you don't see the typical lake or ocean paddler wear. And so a river specific helmet, sometimes I see people with like climbing helmets or bike helmets or ski helmets. And, those do provide protection, but a whitewater specific helmet is designed for multiple impact for keeping your head afloat. So it's got a more specific design than the other types of helmets. So that's something else I would recommend as a requirement for getting on whitewater. And then the clothing. A lot of people get on the boards and they like to wear minimal clothing because they feel free that way. And again, most of our rivers have colder water. So unless it's like 100 degrees out, you're probably going to be wearing something that provides a little bit more insulation during the course of the year and a little bit more protection. Appropriate footwear for being around the river environment is also important. So don't like to see people going barefoot paddling on the river because of the potential injury that you can have to your feet. So those are some things related to equipment that I would stress, and there's others. Understanding the river that you're getting into. There's just like in other sports, whether you're looking at skiing or mountain biking or climbing, there's difficulty scale that's used internationally for rivers. So regardless of where you are in the world, we're all speaking the same language when it comes to the classification of a river section. So understanding that, understanding the section of river that you're planning on going on in terms of difficulty. There might be specific hazards on there that you might be able to discern from talking to others that are familiar with the area, from going on to blogs or social media sites that will communicate that to you. Um, and then understanding the water levels. One of the things that I love about paddling on the river is that the river environment is always changing as the water level changes. So if you're paddling out in our area in the springtime, a river might look a lot different than in the fall, because in the springtime we're going to have high water, and in the fall we might have low water before rains or snow comes. So not only is it important to understand the difficulty of the river, but how it's impacted by the level of water that the river has. So there's website that will give you information about that. There's also people that are familiar with the area that are always great to talk to. And then obviously making sure that you have a good group. I always recommend people to go out with others that are experienced. So in the event that there is a situation that has to be dealt with, you're not by yourself.
Yeah, good tips, man, all the way through. I love it. I found in anything that I've ever done that the very first step to being successful and to be able to take my game to a whole new level, per se, is to have the right equipment. It's like could be running, could be yoga, could be river supping, could be bicycle riding. If you have the proper equipment and you feel comfortable that you are protecting yourself in the proper way, then it to me it gives me the freedom to um, fall, gives me the freedom to try things I wouldn't have tried before, with knowing that I have that as a way to protect myself, um, and that I'm prepared. I was something else that came up for me too is that somebody getting into river sup, especially somebody that's never been on a river before, doesn't know much about river, it takes a special mindset, I think. And can you speak a little bit to your mindset, how it maybe what it was like when you first started river supping, and then how it's developed over time, and then how you keep your mind clear and keep focused as you do this sport?
Yeah, I mean, water's moving. It's because the water moves, it creates noise. And so one of the things that that happened to me early on when I started getting into some more challenging whitewater was even just the effect of the noise on the environment adds
Wow.
a whole other element of stress. There is the possibility, especially in bigger hydrology, that you might end up underwater for an extended period of time. And for me, that's a traumatic experience because that's where my bad situation that happened when I was a little kid, and I still deal with that. So for me, going on the river and paddling in bigger rapids is it's almost like therapy because I get to face my one of my greatest fears, which is the fear of drowning, the fear of running out of oxygen when I'm underwater, and so there's a huge part of the sport, especially once you go from, oh, I'm just doing this for recreation on a section of river that maybe is casual, and you're pushing it into, harder levels of whitewater where now you're dealing with, potentially more serious situations, and so the mental aspect becomes like a really big component of the sport. And I think that goes for many other sports as somebody starts getting into more of the peak or higher up on the peak level of the sport, and you're starting to get into more challenging situations that you're facing, whether it's like the technique or the terrain that's getting more difficult. Now the mental aspect become a big component of it. um, I often hear people saying that making a bad decision on the river is better than making no decision. So having the ability to like not think but just act is really important. And I think one of the things that's really helpful with that is being able to trust your ability level. And that's why I spend countless hours at, like physical stuff has never come easy to me. I'm the guy that has to go out and like practice something over and over and over and over for it to become sort of like routine, right? There's friends and there's others that I paddle with that I see the some of these techniques come really easy to them, and I'm envious of that at times. But I also realize that some of us have to work a little bit harder to get good at something, and so regardless of how you're going to get there, I think having confidence in your ability level is huge to be able to have trust in your ability to be able to pull something off. And so when things start to get stressful, then that's something that I rely on is the confidence in my abilities. Um, I find that um, understanding how the water moves, understanding the consequence is also really important. And what I mean by that is that there's times, and my friend Anna might say that there's stories that we believe, stories that we've created in our mind about consequences that are not necessarily true. And so understanding the difference between reality of the consequence and the story that we've created in our mind is also important. Because if you focus too much on this sort of like dream world of what could happen, then fear might take over. So it's important to be able to distinguish between the two. And I find that sometimes the stories are too strong, and you're like, oh, I don't really want to put myself in this situation, even though maybe my understanding of the consequence is not accurate. I still don't want to chance it, right? And so some days you might decide, I'm just going to walk around this rapid. That rapid will probably still be there tomorrow or next week, the week after, next year. So I can come back and do it again when I'm in a better mind space to tackle the situation, because now you're dealing with a situation that is more high risk. So I would say confidence is a huge piece in the mental aspect of the game. And one way that we can build that is by going out and paddling in an environment that we're comfortable with, but making that environment more challenging. There's harder lines that you can take on rapids. There's more eddies that you can catch. There's more ferries that you can do. there's more tricks that you can try to pull off, right, on terrain that you're comfortable with. And so, as my friend Anna would say, is practice the hard moves in easy whitewater, and that's a great way to improve your confidence.
I love listening to you, and naturally, I believe just because I teach yoga for a profession, and I'm constantly looking at bridging the gap between yoga and life. Right, yoga is life. Whitewater stand up paddleboarding is the same as life. Paddleboarding is the same as life. I'm listening to you from the lens of like, how does this relate to everyday life? And how is this, how could this have possibly changed Davide's everyday life? And I'm curious, how has being consistent in your river sup changed what you do on the daily and who you are on the daily?
Yeah, so I mean, it's being on the river is a metaphor for life, you know. Initially, when I started paddling on the river, not having the best understanding of hydrology, I would often find myself being very inefficient. I would find myself paddling against the current. Yeah, and because I was doing that, and because I was inefficient, all of a sudden, I'm tired, I'm not having as good of a time because I'm exerting all this excess energy. And when I realized that, the important thing is the river's going to go somewhere, just like life goes somewhere. And so sometimes you might be able to move successfully across the river, but you can't change the direction the river goes. So the best you can do is, once you realize that, is put yourself in a place where you can flow with the river. Yeah. And you might be able to change where you go on the river because of your understanding of hydrology, and be successful at it. And sort of like that becomes for me a metaphor for life in general. Yeah. Don't fight life. Sometimes stuff happens that's outside of your control, but you can place yourself in a situation to be successful as long as you understand the situation that you're in. And to me, that's very similar to what happens on the river.
Do you do any other forms of cross training in preparation for river sup?
Yeah, so I'm pretty busy, and I have a regular job. I don't know if Jeannie would agree of being like a real job, but I have a job that I do on the days that I'm not on the river, and I teach industrial rope access classes, and so I'm working on rope in a training environment for others that are going out to do the actual work. So that's one of the ways that I stay fit, is climbing up and down ropes using specialized equipment. But besides that, my main way of staying fit and ready for the whitewater is being on the river. I typically nowadays spend about 150 days a year on the river. So that's a pretty good ratio of time in whitewater. And I find that, like I said, it's my therapy. It sort of like gives me an opportunity to face my fears, to disconnect from all the other stressors that might be happening on in life outside of the river. So it's one of the things that I love, is I have to be 100% focused on what is happening in front of me, and so that just provides me with so much joy, so much sanity, so much peace. And so that's my main source of training, is my time on the river.
Yeah, and of course, Jeannie is supporting you in that, which is another thing I wanted to talk
Absolutely.
about is the power of having a spouse behind you or alongside of you, or however you want to look at it. Um, how has your relationship with Jeannie developed since this has started for you?
Yeah, so Jeannie was the driving force behind me starting my paddling endeavor. She's the one that got me on a board in the first place. She's the one that was besides me when we took our first steps in moving water. She's the one that encouraged me to start the business of getting more people on the river. She's the one that's helping me create community with our local paddlers. She's gone on numerous trips with me all over the world, and she's giving me the freedom to continue this endeavor, even when she's not able to be with me or come with me or travel with me. So having that support has been incredible. So I'm super thankful for that.
Yeah, I remember a post that there was a picture of you and her in a wave, and I think it said something along the lines of those who paddle together and swim together stay together.
Yes.
Something like that. How many years have you two been together?
So we got married in 2003. So this December is going to be our 20-year anniversary.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
man.
thank you.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And do you have a dog too, or a couple dogs?
We have no dog. As you can see in the background, we have two furry creatures that share our living space. I purposely closed the door to the office so that they wouldn't make a visit during our interview today.
No added guests with the cats, huh? Now I know a lot of people stand up paddleboard on the lake. I don't know about the river, but with their dogs. How about cats? Have you ever seen anybody stand up paddleboarding with their cats?
So I have not seen it live. I've seen it on social media. We have friends that have cats that travel with them that are paddlers. So I'm sure at some point I'll cross paths with a sup cat.
The sup cat. That's funny. That could be the hot new thing. You know, a lot of people they call spotted dog yoga and sup, and they ask if we do puppy yoga. Have you ever heard of puppy yoga?
I have not. I've heard of goat yoga, but I haven't heard of puppy yoga. So
No, I always have to remind them. I'm like, no, we do yoga for humans, but we named it after our dog. You know,
love
but
it.
apparently puppy yoga is a thing nowadays too. So um, cat supping could be the next hot thing. Speaking of animals, squirrel. Let me bring it back. How many paddleboard classes do you do a year, or is it not really limited to a number? Is it just different seasons that you do the paddleboard classes, or when is it available for people if they want to try it out?
Yeah, so I can run classes year round. What we're limited by on the South Fork of the American River is when there is water. So there is a dam that releases water on the river, and based on the snow year that we've had and how full the reservoir is, we might have water more or less days during the course of the year. Typically, the summertime, we have water every day. And then in the wintertime, we have water only on the weekends. On the shoulder season, in the spring and the fall, we might have water anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. Obviously, in the springtime, we might also have water that, in addition to the release, is coming from rain or snow melt. And so we might have high water conditions, and then we might not be able to run classes because the water is too high. So technically, provided the conditions are available and there's water that's to an acceptable level, we can run classes year round. Most of the classes that I offer tend to take place in the summer months because the temperature is warmer. It's more pleasant to be on the river, more
Yeah.
pleasant to be in the water. Taking a class in the shoulder season sometimes require folks coming with dry suits, and that's something that they might already own or borrow from a friend, or there's a place in town where we provide the classes that rents dry suits, but it requires like a different type of attire. But as long as there's interest, I can run classes for folks year round. And I run group classes for all different levels of ability, and I run private sessions as well. The one thing that I require for folks that are taking the beginner class is that they have prior experience stand-up paddleboarding on water, right? Whether that's on a lake or the ocean. What I don't do is teach folks that have not stand-up paddleboarded before. So a little bit of a prior experience is required, but no river experience is required. That's part of the what I provide during the lesson.
Yeah, really good. There's been a huge emergence of people getting into paddleboard yoga, I would say, since 2020. And probably before that, but at least that's when I started to notice the big amount of people getting into paddleboarding. And have you seen the sport of river sup growing alongside of that?
I have, yeah. It used to be when I would go on the river on a busy weekend in the summertime, that if there was somebody stand up paddleboarding, well, typically they were with me in the same group that I was going. You know, if it was a play day and not a class day, but there was nobody on the river that would stand a paddleboard that I wouldn't know. I knew everybody. And now on your average summer weekend, if I go on the river, I see at least one person on the river on a stand-up paddleboard that I do not know. And so I'm always excited for that because it's like, oh, the sport is growing. There's people getting into the sport that are not associated with me. You know, it's sort of starting to happen on its own, and it's great because at the beginning I felt like if I took a day off, then the sport was like regressing. You know, so I couldn't take any days off. You know,
Yeah.
there's plenty of friends that I have now in the area that are carrying the torch for me when I'm away. And like
Mm.
this summer, I was literally home for like 2.5 weeks from like mid-April to like early September. I was able to do that because and feel like I wasn't letting people down because there's plenty of other folks that I have gotten into the sport that are now continuing that process. They're organizing trips. They're getting friends onto the river. They're introducing people to the sport, and I don't have to be here every day. So it's a really cool to see that, to experience it. To basically look at the fruits of your labors growing, and you don't have to be there to water them every day because others are doing that for you.
Yeah, you ignited a flame and a fire in people, and they're carrying it forward. It's really neat to see. Katie and I, we moved to right outside of Boise almost 3 years ago, and our studio in Folsom is still there, surviving and thriving because there's teachers and staff members and community members who have taken what we started the fire with, this fire of building community and bringing yoga and meditation and whatnot to the Folsom community. They took that and they ran with it. They've like grabbed a hold of it, and it really is inspiring to see that too. So I know where you're coming from there. It's really neat to see it carry on without you in some way, even though you will always be a part of it because you're the one that started that fire. Yeah,
It's so
really.
awesome.
Yeah,
So
it is
awesome.
really awesome. What is the other company you work with?
California Water Sport Collective
Water
is
Sport Collective.
the company that I work through for providing the instructions on the South Fork American River. It started out as a women's only instruction group, started by Melissa Demery, and then over the years it evolved into offering instruction to everyone, not just women. And we now have obviously the kayaking school. It's a place where pack rafting is one of the new hot crafts that you see on the river, and it's basically a super lightweight version of an inflatable kayak that
Hmm.
weighs nothing and packs down really small. So people that are doing expeditions that especially involve like a more serious hike in to the place that you're going to paddle are getting into the use of these crafts. And so Cali Collective provides instructions specifically to those. As well, they have a sea kayaking division that provides instructions in the ocean, and then they also have me as the director of the SUP program, providing whitewater SUP instruction.
You don't just do the whitewater instruction, but also you take people on retreats. And I want to touch on that a little bit because this last year you spent some serious time overseas with groups of people. And I'm sure you have some upcoming events too you'd like to talk about, but tell us about the whitewater retreats that you're doing, where you've gone, where your favorite places are, and what's coming up for you in that realm.
Yeah, so I love the ability to introduce people to the sport in a class setting, and I love the ability to be able to coach them to improve their skills. But I find that the real magic is when you can get somebody on a river for an extended period of time. Yeah, and so I have, in my own personal travel, I have looked for places that are special, whether there's a special community there, maybe the wildlife, the setting, the type of whitewater that you're encountering. And so I've handpicked certain locations throughout the world that I have found special. And so that's where I have built this network of trips that I offer, and they're typically anywhere from like 7 to 10 days in length. Some of my favorites that I run are the trips to Europe. There's a trip that I take on this magical river in Slovenia, the Socha River, right outside the border with northeastern Italy. And I've taken this trip now every year except for one since the first time I've gone there in 2018. And I love taking people there. Really special place. You can drink the water straight out of the river.
Wow.
It's like the most incredible water that you can see. Um, Recently, I have developed another trip in the Balkans in Montenegro on the Tara River. It's one of the few places in Europe where you can experience a multi-day river trip in a wilderness environment. Similar water quality to the Sochi River, but this is a bigger volume river with bigger hydrology. And we do a couple of days where we're doing day trips, and then we do an extended trip on the river, which is magical. I remember when I was there last summer, we camped outside one of the nights, and there was fireflies everywhere. So I'm
Wow.
sleeping like literally 15 feet away from the water, looking up, sleeping on my board in my sleeping bag, and looking up, and there's literally like fireflies all over the place right above me, and it was a pretty magical experience. One of my other international trips that I offer annually is in Costa Rica. We love to go somewhere warm when it's cold here, and leave the dry suit at home. And Costa Rica is a magical place for whitewater. I am a sucker for wildlife, and there's such unbelievable wildlife in Costa Rica, and you're paddling in like this basically botanical garden of like magical creatures all around you. So not only do you have amazing whitewater, but there's this magical environment that you're in with, you know, all different types of animals that you get to see from the river. The people there are incredible. There's a
Mm.
team of guides that we partner with there. That's like our, Costa Rican family, and we love all of them. And the food is incredible. So really, really cool spot to go. And we usually do a trip that's a little longer trip. We usually do 10 days there, and we spend a few days on the ocean and doing some surfing before we get on the whitewater. So you get
Mm.
to experience both the Pacific side and the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, and it's a pretty special country and place to be. And then some of my other favorite trips that I actually run in the U.S. are multi-day river trips in sections of rivers that have been designated wild and scenic. So they're more remote, and there's usually a permit application if you're trying to go and do these rivers as a private boater. So a lot of folks that can get on a private trip, they'll go on a commercial trip, and I usually partner with rafting companies that have commercial permits on these rivers, and I bring my guests, my sup guests along. And the nice things about these multi-day river trips is they're fully catered. The food is amazing. You're camping right next to the river, and we're running them in the summer when the weather is just warm and it's nice to be in the water. Um, and you're experiencing, some pretty incredible wilderness areas in the U.S. And based on your level of ability, if you don't feel comfortable running a section of the river, there's room in the raft, so you can just hang out in the raft and enjoy the white water there. If you want more excitement, you can jump on the board and paddle every rapid that we run. Those trips are usually anywhere from 5 to 7 days, and they're just incredible. And two of my favorites are on the main Salmon River in Idaho, in the French Church Wilderness River of No Return, and then on the Rogue River in Southern Oregon are two of my favorite of those trips. And I'm hoping to have both of those run next summer, along with the trip to Slovenia and the trip to Montenegro.
Oh my goodness, man, that sounds so amazing. I know just getting outside for me is incredibly healing, and I know everyone listening to this podcast would agree. It's a very special thing that we have the ability to do here in the United States and with the protected areas that we have. And I know we were talking earlier, in Europe, there's not as many places that are protected, but to be able to go with an experienced guide like you, Davide, and somebody who's got such a great attitude and energy about them, I think would be such an amazing experience. So I hope the people, those of you listening to this podcast, take a look at not only the classes that Davide has to offer and as far as learning river sup, but also the amazing retreats that he has coming up. It's been a total blessing for me to have a connection with you, Davide, and I'm really so excited. I've been excited all morning. Well, really, ever since you booked, I've been really excited about having you on the Play Hard and Love Big radio podcast, because here on this podcast, we really focus on bringing in people who inspire community and people who share stories that bring community together. And I know that that's what you're all about. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today, Davide.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's always great.
Yeah, you got it. Hey, everyone, I'll leave in the show notes ways for you to get a hold of Mr. Sartoni. TheRiverSupGuide.com is your main URL. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Yep. And you can follow him on Instagram, and I totally suggest you do, because he's got some really great photos that I love scrolling through. You get to see all of the cool places that he's been, and maybe places where you'll end up with him someday. Thanks for listening to Play Hard and Love Big Radio, the official podcast of Spotted Dog Yoga and Sup, based out of Folsom, California. Play Hard and Love Big Radio is dedicated to bringing you the inspirational people and the inspirational stories to help you connect to your center so that you can live a more purposeful and passionate life. Davide Sartoni, you've done that for us today, and we really appreciate it. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you. See you. Peace. Pura Vida, right? Pura Vida.